pulled up exactly where we're up to, so if you'd like to just carry on, and if there are any additional questions that people have, they can let us know. Had you finished going through them, or?
Yes, we have. We've, Ivan would just like to wrap up.
We can just wrap this up.
Ivan, please wrap up.
Thank you. Look, we've had a good discussion this morning. So as a summary, the development promotes urban consolidation. There have been some significant site-specific limitations, but these are largely overcome. We heard this morning that there may be some costs with providing some of the infrastructure, but those costs are no more than what normally happen when you were developing new areas, and that planning leads infrastructure rather than the other way around. So I don't think there's any concern there. To be prudent, we feel that a low density housing is the least risk option, because there are geotechnical things going on here, and we feel that a low density residential, as it has been done already in parts of the basin, is the safest option from both a public and private cost point of view. The sticking points are that there are some statutory matters to be considered, and we've had a letter this morning from Sarah about that. We know that this area is outside the urban limits, or outside the priority area for servicing. We know that. So it's inconsistent with the LURP as it stands. It's not giving effect to the RPS as it stands, but there are processes by which those matters can be resolved through various forums. So that was really all I wanted to say, just to wrap that up.
All right. Yep, Paul.
What is a low density, just in terms of like how many houses per hectare? Or
it would be about 5. We're talking about 2,000 square metre sections, the same as Taunton Green. We may get submissions to go higher than that, but those submissions would have to be assessed on their merits with some very good geotechnical information to support it.
Could they get a variation? In other words, is there a possibility they could intensify
further down the track? The current rules make it non-compliant to go below 2,000 square metres. If they are going to go below 2,000 square metres, I think that would be a matter to be sorted out at the independent hearings panel stage, to be quite honest. In the future, of course, depending on how they lay they'd have to lay their initial subdivisions out very carefully. But the way that the existing Taunton Green and one or two others around there have been laid out, some sites could be subdivided, some can't. It depends on where they put their dwelling.
Phil?
Look, I'm sorry if it was late and missed part of this, but my question around this is really, when we look at natural hazards, I know the staff are going to include the information, like, for example, what we received from the geographers at Canterbury, that overall, unfortunately, our city is sinking. So, and I'm not expecting you to comment on that, Ivan, and perhaps I'll ask them this when it comes to the natural hazards part, people like Helen, but is that being taken into account?
Yes, we have had this morning the geotechnical advisor providing information on that whole geotechnical sphere, but there is the area. There is a very gradual sinking there at the moment, existing developments. It hasn't caused any concern to the landowners to date that I'm aware of. Where you get a lot of filling, that will put weight on the ground as well, and there have been one or two issues where that's happened. We don't anticipate a lot of filling in this particular subdivision, but in any event, where that has happened, it has affected the gravity sewer system, but we're proposing pressure systems here. Therefore, that issue won't. If the ground does gradually sink, it's not going to affect houses. People's lawns may wobble a wee bit in the future, but that hasn't really been an issue that I'm aware of in the last 20 years with these developments that have already been underway.
Perhaps I could just reiterate the geotech said that the area that's been proposed for development, which is only the high areas around the periphery of the basin, not the lower areas that obviously would be covered by flooding, it would relate to a TC2 type standing under Sarah's technical categories. And the sinking is mostly related to peat in this area, a very deep level of peat, which is underlain again by scorias and rock. So what she said was that doesn't make it, that doesn't rule it out for use for development. It just means that the foundations of any buildings to go on there need to be done correctly. And also, as Ivan has pointed out, you shouldn't have too many buildings on an area because that will flatten it. That would be too heavy.
All right.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's parts of Christchurch really that are like that, but yeah, so the development would have to be done very carefully. I think Paul would probably make that point as well, that if you get a lot of dewatering, as an example, that could exacerbate things. So the development would have to be done quite carefully.
All right, so that's the Cranford Basin chapter.
Yes, thank you. So moving on now to the specific purpose zone flatland recovery, we have Kimberly Rolton. This is chapter 21 in your chapters.
So, following the Canterbury earthquakes, the residential red zone areas on the flat were identified by government where people and property could be at risk from natural hazards, and where it was considered that those risks couldn't be reasonably mitigated.
Well, that's actually not correct. So I've made this point several times, which is why we now go red zone, because they didn't zone and they didn't say that it couldn't be mitigated. They said that the costs of mitigation would be too great and the time involved would be too significant to allow for that to occur. And they didn't decide a purchasing regime other than a voluntary one, and it's been the subject of a court case. So I think this section 32 needs a little bit more work done on it.
Okay, yep.
Yeah.
So just to let you know the areas that the specific purpose flatland recovery zone will be covering. It includes the land along the Avon River and also South Shore at New Brighton and the Brooklands area as well. It will not include any of the Port Hills areas. And so I guess this chapter is seeking to address the following issues. Just the uncertain future intended use of this land, including options for long-term recovery, as well as the fact that parts of the area are also subject to multiple natural hazards. Therefore, we consider there's a need to protect the land so that long-term recovery and land use opportunities can be more readily realised in the future. The land use recovery plan was specifically excluded from considering the residential red zone, and it states that future use of land in the areas known as the residential red zone will be addressed through the residential red zone program. Now, it's through this program, Sarah will undertake a public engagement process to determine future use options. And in addition to this, Council are also undertaking a process of identifying what infrastructure requirements may be needed in the area for stormwater or flood management control, and where this might need to utilise this land. And I guess the outcome of that program will then inform a later plan change to confirm the future zoning. We've had some brief discussions with Sarah as to the time frame of that process, and yes, that's not known at this point in time. So there's a separate time frame and process where that will be taking place. Yep. But in the interim period, there's a need to ensure that activities taking place in the area will not compromise or impede the long-term recovery of the zone or exacerbate the consequences of natural hazards. So through this review, we are proposing to defer final zoning of this land to enable this work to take place, the program, the consideration of what long-term outcomes are to be sought and what the recovery needs of the zone are. So we're proposing a holding zoning with provisions that enable elements of immediate recovery activity and the land management activities that Sarah are undertaking on the land that they own, noting that there's still people that are living in parts of the area, and with the avoidance of any activities that may lead to intensification or any subdivision or new development, which may limit long-term recovery potential. I guess, and then as I touched on earlier, given the type of activity or land management activity work that is taking place, such as a lot of demolition work, it's important, therefore, that we address, the adverse effects associated with those activities. So really looking at, sort of the surrounding environment and effects at the interface and on occupied residential units. And Sarah has had the opportunity to have a look at this chapter and the proposed approach and provisions, and they've been quite comfortable with this approach. And yes.
Yep. Yes.
Would this hinder any sort of future development or project ideas that could take place in the flat land recovery zone?
I think it would depend on the timing of that, because at the moment these provisions are very much hold. We don't want to do anything too significant, and no new development at this point in time. However, I guess depending on
That is the purpose of the Sarah program, is to identify what the community wants to happen out there, and they have a whole program that will deal with that. But we don't know the timing of when that's going to actually come out. And so our purpose here is simply just to hold things as they are.
And if we wanted to do like any sort of flood mitigation, like banking and so forth, that wouldn't interfere with this either?
No, there is there is provision for hazard management work such as that. They're done by council.
Stormwater, that's not hazard management.
No.
That's to do with improving the quality of the stormwater going into the river. I mean, one day we'd actually quite like to have clean rivers.
Yeah, there's provisions for obviously maintenance and repair and use of existing infrastructure, and the provisions of the utilities chapter will apply. So whether or not, I'm not certain what they're covered in that.
So if it's so what does that mean? Like if we wanted to improve the stormwater, so that was all kind of agreed, we wouldn't be able to do that under our own plan?
I'm not certain what the utilities chapter's provisions are.
No, it's not utilities, it's stormwater. For example, you might have wetlands placed into the river, the removal of stock banks, which is not the maintenance of existing flood protection works and bank erosion works. I mean, I just think that you may not have thought of things that should be permitted that wouldn't be permitted in this time frame, because it may well be that we will want to do some of that work ahead of the future use discussion.
Exactly. Yes.
This chapter has been discussed at some length with Sarah officials and also through the collaborative advisory group that includes members from various agencies, including Sarah. What I'd like to do again is come back to you on Wednesday then to see if that has been discussed and considered as part of this chapter and what their response was to that.
Okay. There is a... that's fine. Yep. I think
Last
that's,
slide.
Oh, that's the other.
Okay, well, resolutions were being dealt with next Friday.
Yep.
So now we have
natural and cultural
a
heritage.
rather large chapter for you.